Hey friends, I'm Lynn Debilzen, and welcome to Redraw Your Path, a podcast where I share stories of people who have made big changes in their lives and forged their own unique paths. I talk with guests about their moments of messiness, fear, and reframing on their way to where they are now. My goal is to inspire you about the shape your life could take. So let's get inspired. I am so excited to share this episode with you today with Tine Zekis. Christine or Tine Zekis is an educator turned software engineer, international speaker, and best-selling author of Overcoming Imposter Syndrome at Work, The Black Woman's Guide to Conquer Perfectionism, Stop Overthinking, and Thrive in Your Career. She is the founder and CEO of Getting Black Women Paid, which empowers Black women professionals to accelerate their careers and soar past the six-figure mark. Tine is a sought-after speaker on panels and at tech conferences where she discusses salary negotiation, career changers, imposter syndrome, and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in the industry. I connected with Tine about a year ago. She spoke at a program I am in, and I just really loved her energy and vibe and everything she had to say. And I really hope you enjoy this episode. We get a little emotional, so keep your tissues nearby and enjoy. Tine, welcome to Redraw Your Path. It's so great to have you here today. How are you?
I am great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to get into this conversation and share your story with listeners because it's a powerful one. So I like to bookend with my guests and understand where and how they grew up and then what they're doing now, and then we'll go back and hear the story of how you got there. So can
Perfect.
you give me some context about that childhood and where and how you grew up?
Absolutely. So I grew up in a suburb of Chicago called Oak Park, specifically because it's a diverse town. My folks are interracial, so my mom's white, my dad's black. He's an immigrant from Nigeria. And so I grew up biracial in a town where I actually knew other biracial kids. And we can get into a whole thing about my concept of race and how that developed. But yeah, so my upbringing was in this very diverse, very liberal town. I grew up pretty sheltered from, I guess, political things. And yeah, I loved my childhood. Excellent schools, and that was the basic upbringing.
Awesome. I've driven through Oak Park. I think I've told
Oh
you that.
yeah?
So yeah, I have friends that live on the south side of Chicago, and so like driving in through the
Oh
west
yeah.
side.
Right, the highway goes right through it. Yeah.
Yep.
There are two left side on ramps on either side of Oak Park, and people always joke it's because Oak Park is too liberal. They couldn't put their on ramps on the right.
I love that. I love that. Well, and okay, you mentioned growing up as a biracial kiddo and the daughter of an immigrant too, and knowing other biracial children. What did that mean to you? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a brother, so my house was the only place where I was ever in the majority, right? My brother and I were the two biracial people in the house. But growing up, I think I developed my concept of race a little later than some other kids because I think early on kids start asking questions, oh, why does that person look different from our family, right? Whereas I just thought everybody looked different. Sue looks like Sue and John looks like John. I didn't understand that there were groupings, right, by by color or appearance. And so I remember it was third grade. Someone asked me, are you black or white? And I had never thought about it before. And so I gave it a thought and I said, I think I'm gray.
Love that. Somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I'd learned in art class, right? You mix black and white and you get gray. But I think it was eighth grade where I first had a very close friend who was also biracial. And that was the first time I got to really talk to someone about what that experience had been like. And we became close. We're still friends now. Yeah, it was an interesting experience to sort of develop amongst a diverse group of people because at first it just didn't matter for
Mm-hmm.
probably a long time. Obviously it started to matter. But the other thing I wanted to mention is that as a black kid growing up with a white parent and with an immigrant parent, I didn't necessarily relate culturally with other African American kids. I
Mm,
mostly, for me, it was other children of immigrants where we had that instant
mm-hmm.
connection. Oh, I couldn't get away with that at home or whatever, where you didn't have to explain anything. And it wasn't really until my adulthood that I started really identifying more with Black Americans and with Black culture. So I think growing up, it was more I am my own individual self. And then it was other children of immigrants that I was like, oh, you get me.
I love that. It sounds like as a kid, and I think children do this automatically, is you were pulling in all these identities
Hmm.
together and making sense of them in on your own, but then thinking about them happened as
Right.
you got older and older and older and started interacting more with the world and with the systems
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
exist in the
And
world.
it's so funny to watch kids develop sort of a worldview based on their limited experience. My niece, when she was very young, so her dad, my brother, is biracial and her mom is white. And then she was looking at her grandparents, right? Black grandpa, white grandma. And she said, boys are black and girls are white.
Mm.
But she looked at her brother and she said, oh, but he and I are both white. And so she thought about it. And then she said, oh, mommies are white and daddies are black. So when my brother has kids, he'll be black too. Like she just, she had a very limited sample size and she
Yeah.
was trying to work with what she could see.
Yeah, I mean that, and that's what we do, right? And I think even as an adult, and that's where this podcast came from, is
Hmm.
even as an adult, I was trying to make sense of what I could see in the
Yeah.
world. And
Yeah.
then the more I exposed myself to other things, oh, people can run their own business. I never even
Right.
conceived of that idea. So it's interesting. Our
Hmm.
brains are constantly taking in the information of what's around us. And if
Yeah.
what's around us is only a certain thing, which it
Hmm.
always will be, it's not going to grow in that understanding until we expand that environment.
Yeah. And that's why they say you can't be it if you can't see it, right?
Hmm.
If you don't know that that's a possibility, how do you know to pursue it?
Yeah, I love that. Okay, look at us getting all meta already. Okay, so let's fast forward. So you grew up in a very diverse suburb of Chicago, biracial and daughter of an immigrant and a white mother. Let's fast forward to now.
Hmm.
Where and how are you currently spending your days, teen?
So I am back in Oak Park. I wanted my kids to know other biracial children. My
Mm.
husband is white, and so yeah, we're back. But in terms of my day to day, I am running my business, getting Black women paid, and that's what I do. I help Black women accelerate their careers and increase their income and pursue financial freedom.
Awesome. Awesome. I love that. So important. And I'm excited to hear like how'd you get there? Because it
Hmm.
probably didn't just happen overnight, like you graduated from college and then boom,
Oh my
let's do this
goodness.
thing.
So many twists and turns. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm curious before we start to talk about those many twists and turns. Most of us grow up with some sort of external pressures or expectations that were placed on us. And I'm curious if you would be able to talk about those for you. What expectations
Hmm.
do you feel like you grew up with?
Oh, absolutely. So, my Nigerian father, his grandparents were illiterate. His parents were educators. And then he and all of his siblings had professional degrees. So
Mm,
it was, you will do better than I did in terms of each generation. I remember I was in second grade and I got a C on a spelling test. And my dad sat me down and he said, everyone in this family goes to college. And
mm.
I thought that colleges were going to be looking at my second grade spelling test.
Of course, they
Right.
go back. Yeah.
So I learned how to spell and I never got a C on a spelling test again. For
Mm.
me, definitely the expectation was I'm going to be going to college and using that degree in some way.
Can I ask a question about that? As you grew older, did you have any concept of how your father defined better? Each generation does what needs to do better than the last. So, did he have a definition of that? Was it solely education? Was it financial? Was it status in life?
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I think when I was younger, I wasn't sure what that would look like, right? Because if they all got professional degrees, now it's okay. So I got to be what, a doctor or what do I have
Mm-hmm.
to do? But now I know my dad is so proud of my brother and me for having an impact on society,
Mm-hmm.
right? So my dad is an architect. In addition to having his business, he is a public servant. He has served on school board. He was the president of the school board. He is a village trustee. He's a Rotarian, so the Rotary Club who
Mm-hmm.
do all kinds of charity work and work on eradicating polio. He was the governor of his district for Rotary, so he is constantly giving back to the
Mm-hmm.
community. And for me, what I see from him now is that he's proud that we are having a positive impact, that he wants us to have a legacy. My
Mm-hmm.
brother is an educator as well. And we'll talk about this, but I was briefly a teacher. But I know he's so proud of the work I'm doing with getting Black women paid. He was the first person to buy my book, and my mom was the first person to read it cover to cover. So my folks are endlessly supportive. But to me, it seems like the thing that makes them most proud is one, our children, right? They love being grandparents, and two, that we are happy and helping others.
I love that. I love that. Did your second grade brain have any sense of that? Or was your second grade brain like,
Oh
oh my
no.
gosh, I just need to be a better speller?
No, I was like, oh, yeah, I better not bring home a C again. I even remember eighth grade, we had to do a constitution test. And for some reason, the scale was something weird. It was like out of 110. And I think I got 108. And I was so proud. And I came home and I said, Dad, I got 108 out of 110. And he said, what happened to those other 2 points? And I was just
Yeah.
crushed. But as I'm looking back at that, that is such a distant memory because now he has seen me through, I'll say, quote unquote failures. And I know that as long as I'm doing my best, he's proud.
I love that for you. That's a really special belief to grow up with
Hmm.
that your parents are going to be proud of you as long as you're
Yeah.
doing your best and having that impact.
Yeah.
Any other expectations that you felt like you grew up with?
Gosh, I mean, I think the main thing was college. I remember
Yeah.
in high school, oh, well, here's one. In eighth grade, they had an assembly for us to get ready for high school. And they told us every honors class is going to be an hour of homework every night, and you shouldn't take more than one or two honors classes. And so I came home and I said, oh, I'm not going to take more than one or two honors classes because they said XYZ. And my mom was like, you're taking all honors courses. What are you talking about? Right. Like she had to explain to me that like the advice they were giving generally for everyone did not apply to
Mhm.
me. And I think that they were trying to help me understand. I was a smart kid and I could do the work. Also, I think they were annoyed that Black kids were getting this advice, right? That Black
Mm.
kids were getting the advice not to take more than one or two honors courses because I did find in high school I was one of the only Black kids in my class.
Mm.
And then even towards the end of high school, I was advocating for them to stop giving that messaging to Black kids.
Wow, as a high schooler, you were making that like plea already.
Yeah. Yeah. I was in a group called I think it was Minority Student Achievement Network, and they kept referring to us as overachieving. And I was like, no, we're achieving. It's just maybe
Hmm.
we're overachieving your expectations. But the purpose of that group was to help eliminate the achievement gap. And unfortunately, I ended up back at the high school years later, and they were still doing research on the achievement gap. And I'm like, we were doing research when I went here.
Hmm.
Let's take some action. Yeah, you can still walk into a classroom and tell by the color what level the class is, which is
Yeah,
really frustrating.
absolutely. In 2024, still very much a reality. And I spent several years of my career like working on that in educational
Hmm.
systems. And gosh, why does change take so long?
Yes.
Okay, so you grew up with those expectations of you're going to
Hmm.
go to college, but you're also going to be really like high achieving and you're going to reach your potential, it sounds
Right.
like, which is really powerful messaging to have from your parents. So let's
Hmm.
talk about those twists and turns. How did you
Yeah.
start like laying out your path or what was the path you laid out for yourself and what's the first way you redrew it?
Sure. Sure. So in high school, I decided I was going to be a high school math teacher. I was tutoring classmates and I had a math teacher that I really didn't like. And I was,
Mm.
no one should have a math teacher like this. I'm going to do so much better. And so I went to college as a math major, and calculus kicked my butt.
Calculus one,
And
two, or three, or all of
I
them.
don't even remember. I don't even remember whichever one I was in. I think it was two. I think I
It's so
tested into
much.
two.
Hmm.
Well, first of all, because it was a prerequisite for all the other math courses, I assumed that much like math had been my whole life, it was going to compound on itself, right? And so if I didn't get this, I wouldn't understand the next thing. And because I had done well in math my whole life, I didn't know how to study. I didn't know how to
Mm.
learn math if it didn't come immediately. So I decided I was bad at math, and I ran crying to the humanities.
Oh
Um,
no. What a system that just allows you to kind of absorb that message. Oh, I must be bad at this thing that I've excelled at
right.
so much. Okay, sorry, that's my soapbox.
I gotcha. So it was after 1 or 2 semesters of attempting calculus that I changed majors. I majored in African and African American studies and
Mm.
psychology. I minored in music. I was in a singing group. I ended up directing that group. Even after college, I was in the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra for a while as a choral singer. So that was the first pivot was I'm just going to study what I like.
Mm.
And Black studies was just incredible for me. I think it was my senior year of high school was the first time I got to take African American lit, and I just loved it. And so that became my major. And then I graduated and was like, oh, what the heck do I do with a degree in Black studies and psychology?
Mm. Can I ask what made
Yeah.
you drawn to psychology specifically? Was it just, oh, you were enjoying those classes, those electives, and let's keep going down this
I
path?
guess so. I think I also took psychology in high school, and I think that was another one of the courses that I found really interesting. And I was still interested in education, and so it was a lot of like childhood development
Mm.
and things like that. So I was thinking that I would now teach maybe elementary school because with those specific degrees, you can't do a specialization for secondary school.
Mm.
And then I was going to become a professor, do research on race and education, right? Combining that psychology and Black studies and change the education system. That was my new plan. But it started with working at the Container Store, and I had at one point I had 3 jobs, and I was in 3 choirs
Oh my
all
gosh.
at the same
Was that
time.
while you were in college or after?
That was the year after I graduated
Okay. Well,
college.
fun fact, I tried to get a job at the Container Store like 7 years ago when I was living in Denver.
Oh, interesting. They give health benefits no matter how few hours you work. So for me, like when I had the 3 jobs, one of them gave health insurance, one paid me enough to live, and then the other one was the only one I enjoyed, which was I was a paid like section leader and soloist in a church choir. And so I was like, well, I can't drop any of these, right? So
Hmm.
that was
Yeah.
the first year out of college was just getting by using a credit card to eat.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, the days. And did you need your education license if you were working towards a job as an elementary teacher, or what were you going through at that time?
Yeah, so the next transition was grad school. I moved back to Chicago for that. I went to DePaul for education. And again, I was thinking I was going to do elementary, but my first classroom observation placement was in a middle school math class. And I remembered all the
Mm.
reasons I wanted to teach math. Calculus and I had a rematch. Ended
Mm.
up doing full-time grad school for education at night and full-time undergrad math during the day so that I could, and my folks let me live with them during that time, which is what made that possible. And so I ended up getting certified as a high school math teacher through
Wow. So your dreams were coming true, right? I mean,
that.
that initial dream of being a math teacher and being able to impact individual students' lives and teach
Yeah.
something that I'm assuming you still enjoyed math at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, math
Mhm.
has not been the problem. So it was student teaching, the very end of that very expensive program. Student teaching was when I finally realized, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this. Student teaching was so hard. I was so stressed, but there were also some things that just didn't make sense. I had a student who was pregnant with twins and she was failing geometry. And I'm like, should I be helping her learn about congruent triangles, or should I be teaching her how to double a recipe and balance her
Mm.
bank account, right? Like there's math she needs, and this is not it, right? So
Mm.
that was one of the things. And also just I have an over empathy problem. I internalize the stress of others and even project stress on others, right? Like I knew that these kids were like failing a test that I was giving. And so I was stressing. And I'm like, some of them do not
Mm.
care. They're not stressing, but I'm taking on
Mm-hmm.
that stress for them. So I was in physical pain. I remember spring break, I finally healed. I wasn't feeling shoulder pain, back pain, neck pain, all that stuff. And then on the first day back, it was back immediately.
Were you making sense of that at the time, connecting that physical pain to the stress you
Oh
were
yeah.
going through? Okay, you were.
Yeah. No, yeah, I knew it was horrible. So yeah, so I finished my degree and I was like, I don't know what to do. So I mean, I got a teaching job. I was a full-time math teacher with my own classroom for 6 school days.
What were the thoughts going through your head as you were coming to the end of your student teaching, realizing like maybe this isn't my path? And then in those 6 school days, what were you thinking about yourself? What were you thinking about your path?
Yeah, I mean, my mental health was suffering, right? Like I lost 7 pounds in those first 5 days, that first week.
Mm,
I can teach a math concept in 10 different ways, but I only know one way to say don't talk when other people are talking, other
mhm,
than like inserting cuss words, right? I just did not have control over the classroom. And so I had a long weekend. It was Labor Day weekend. I like redid my classroom setup for optimal whatever the heck. And then I came in and I had a panic attack and threw up twice before first period. And I was like, I'm out. That's it. Right? Like
Oh,
that's it.
team.
I remember on the way to school, I would think, if I drove into this median, I could go to the hospital instead of school. So that's when you know you're not supposed to be where you're trying to be, right? Like that's not it. And this is kind of coming back to my dad. He was there helping me set up my classroom. I was working at the school for a month over the summer, setting up
Mhm.
everything in the classroom, everything. He was there helping me hang things up or whatever. And then that day, when I finished, he came. He came to help me take everything down.
Oh,
Ooh, I'm getting teary.
wow. Yeah. Well, and it sounds like, I mean, you had worked so hard towards this plan and this dream, and take your time.
Ooh, I was not expecting that.
Yeah. Well, I'm
Mm.
I'm grateful for your dad. You're gonna make me teary. You're gonna make me teary. But it sounds like you had worked so hard at this thing, and then you had to make that really, sounds like somewhat hard decision, but easy decision
Right.
if you're struggling that much. Were you fearful at that time of, well, what happens if I walk out of this classroom?
Yeah, I mean, I had $60,000 of student debt. I was living with my folks. I didn't know. I was still paying off that credit card, was paying interest on a burger I ate in 2007. I had no plan. And this was, I guess, the second time that my plan had kind of come to an end. Oh, yeah, that was a hard time. The teariness is about the support though. While I figured it out, I was doing like tutoring. I ended up serving as a long-term sub at my old high school. So when I said I went back to my high school,
Mm.
there were 5 math teachers having babies that year. So I just did all of the maternity and paternity leaves. And one of them also taught AP computer science. And so it was basically like intro to Java. And I was staying a chapter ahead of the kids. And I thought, oh, I kind of like this coding thing. One of the
Mhm.
things that surprised me was 30 kids could all have a different answer to the same question and all be right. It wasn't
Mhm.
like math where it's okay, did everyone get 27? I didn't realize there was creativity in programming. So I did a boot camp and got my first job as a software engineer in 2015. So that was the next pivot. And this is now where my mom comes in. My dad was the one who pointed this out. So I'm a third generation woman programmer.
Oh,
My
wow.
Yes, my mom is an IT architect. Her mom was a programmer. She was divorced back in a time where that was really uncommon, and she had to figure out how to raise 5 kids, and she became a programmer. So it was sort of a coming home, I think, in terms
Yeah.
of that next turn on the path.
Had you been exposed to that potential path as a kid growing up?
It's so funny. Not really. We didn't really do coding at school. I think I had to take keyboarding, right? So I learned to type at school.
Did you do Mavis
Um,
Beacon teaches typing? Do you remember
I don't
that?
remember. No, I remember we had something at home that had a little ghost that would haunt things
Hmm.
as you typed. So yeah, I learned to type, but I mostly used that for IMing my brother while he was at college. I didn't really and like writing papers, right? It didn't occur to me that coding could be a path for me. And my mom, she never pushed that on me. I think she still thinks that I'm good at so many things, right? Like she's very good at what she does, and she's very analytical, very logical. And I have some of those traits, and I'm also a creative. And so I think she didn't want to kind of push me in any particular direction. Yeah, I came home.
Which is interesting because that's like another way to support your child, right? Is to
Mm-hmm.
give them the space to figure it out on their own and
Absolutely.
not push, hey, by the way, I'm the second generation programmer and I
Right.
really am looking for a third generation. So that's
Right.
going to be
Right.
you.
And I love a good pattern, so I'm trying really hard not to push my daughter.
Good for
But
you.
yeah.
Exposure is great and
Hmm.
not forcing. And I know as not a parent myself, but as someone who's researched child development quite a bit, gosh, it's hard to
Hmm.
find that balance, I
Yeah.
imagine, as a parent.
Yeah. But even without pushing, my daughter currently has a piece of construction paper folded in half. And when you open it up, it looks like a little laptop, like she drew in a computer. And
Love
so
that.
she'll sit with me and do her work while I'm working.
I love that. I love that. She'll
Yeah,
be learning Java. I don't know if Java is still used.
it
Actually,
is. But if I were to push something on her, it probably wouldn't be Java. But yeah.
okay. I'm like so far removed. Anyways, okay, so math teacher, right? Like then you were welcome back to this to your high school and
Hmm.
that's where you had the freedom to explore and dabble
Yep.
and then deciding like, oh, I really like this thing. I'm going to do a software programming boot camp.
Hmm.
And then I think that was tell me your next turn or you then started that
Sure.
career in programming, right?
Yeah. Yeah. One of my biggest things when I started was that I did not want to find out that a white guy sitting next to me with the same experience was getting paid more than I was. So from the beginning, my boot camp, they gave us sort of here's the average someone in Chicago who graduates from our program is getting on their first role. And so I was like, I am hitting that at least, right? And so
Mm,
even for my very first role, I negotiated, which was a challenge because as a career changer, I thought, okay, well, I'm brand new to this. I'm what leverage do I have? But even in that first interview, I told the hiring manager, I'm a developer who can speak human, right? Like I can break down technical concepts into understandable smaller parts, whether for people who either have a technical background or not. And so that's how I realized I could leverage being a career changer, right? The guys who were building computers since high school and then went and got a computer science degree and then went straight into this didn't know how to put together an agenda and run a meeting,
mm-hmm.
right? And so it was leveraging that career changer skill set and negotiating salaries. So in my first, let's see, I doubled my teaching salary in 2 years as a
Wow.
software engineer, and then I
Mm,
tripled my teaching salary in less than 5 years. So that was a huge deal for me. And alongside of things, I was building my family. My now husband, at the time that I was in boot camp, we were moving in together, and he had saved up a year's salary to quit his job. He did not like his job. And by the time he was kind of running out of that money, I was pregnant. We were married. I was pregnant,
mm,
and I was making more than both of us were making before I made this career change.
mm.
And so he became a full-time dad, which
Wow.
was amazing. So, yeah, just being able to build out that career and build our family at the same time was a huge deal. And I think the teaching bug kind of crept up on me, and I started speaking first about career changers and imposter syndrome, and then more about imposter syndrome, especially for Black women in tech, well, for women in tech and for Black folks in tech. And then I was also informally mentoring other Black women,
Mhm.
helping them get into tech, helping them negotiate their salaries. And at some point, I did kind of hit a ceiling in terms of software engineering. Initially, I enjoyed it, but now it's not my passion, right? And so
Mm,
I was talking with a career coach, and she said, "Well, what gets you excited? What do you love? And I said, getting Black women paid. And she said, go get on GoDaddy, look up
Mm-hmm.
gettingblackwomenpaid.com and buy it, right? So
Love that.
that's how Getting Black Women Paid was born. And so now the new pivot has been really leaning into helping other Black women do what I did and really build that financial future that they're looking for.
That's so powerful. You said, correct me, Teen, if I get this wrong. You said within 5 years you had tripled your salary that you were making in education, right?
That's right. So that's a testament to the negotiation stuff, but also how poorly we pay educators in this
I,
society.
I was going to point that out too. That was,
Hmm.
yes. Were you in that time, were you like actively working on promotions, negotiations that entire time? Or was a lot of it like kind of that, I don't want to say natural, but like that, like everybody this year is getting, I worked in the nonprofit. So 3%. So
Right.
it was like the most you would ever
Yeah, I was
hear.
definitely not going to triple my salary on those 3% increases.
Yeah.
No, so it's interesting. I actually didn't get promoted a lot. I mostly left companies
Mm.
because of racism and sexism. And
Hmm.
on my way out, I negotiated a new salary at the next place. I actually wrote an article about this. I called it the experience tax. I was about 5 years into my career as a software engineer. I was having like a virtual coffee with a teammate who I had known for 6 months. And he said, "Oh, is this your first dev role?" And I was like, "No, I've been doing this for 5 years." And after some rage and imposter syndrome and all the things, I thought about it and I realized, well, like my cohort mates from my boot camp, some of them are at the same company that they started at. I was at my
Mm.
fourth company in five
Hmm.
years. And so each time I had to learn a new code base, learn a new company culture, experience the new flavors of microaggressions, decide if they reach to the level of I got to get out of here, then start a new job search. And it's like, yeah, during this time, I have not been honing my technical skills for 5 years worth of engineering. And so I think about that, the experience tax, right, as the like extra time and energy that Black women have to put into their work because of the other nonsense. My first engineering role, I left because the head of HR licked my face at the holiday party.
Wait. What?
That is the correct response to that. And I
It
was
wasn't
talking,
like it wasn't like you volunteered to do like a body shot, like a tequila, like
no,
assault. Oh my gosh.
no. So I was talking to someone about it and I used the word unacceptable. And I was like, oh, shoot, that means I have to not accept it. And so that was the first time I had to look for a new job. And I got a big salary bump. Another coworker followed me there, got the same salary bump. And both of us on our way out told the engineering department what we were going to be making at our new roles. And after the second one of us left, they actually gave my other colleagues a raise. And in general, I'm always working towards that pay equity and trying to lift everyone else up. Another example, I'm going to use the numbers because I think so many of us don't say the numbers and then we don't know
Hmm.
what to expect. So I was in a role where I was making about 100,000. And again, the company was not a fit. I really needed to get out of there. So I was hoping to get 120 in my next role, but it was a parallel move, same title. And the offer I got was 140.
Wow.
And so obviously I wanted to be like, yes, please, thank you. But I said what I always say, which is thanks so much for the offer. I'd love to get the benefits in writing and look it over and get back to you. And oh, later that day, I saw, I think it was a tweet. This was back when Twitter was Twitter. And it said, Black women, whatever you were going to ask for more. And I was like, shoot,
Hmm.
I got to negotiate, right? So I thought about, okay, so I'm leaving mid-year. What's all the money I'm leaving on the table, right? I'm not going to get my 401k match. I'm not going to get my annual bonus. I need to meet a new deductible, right? I already met my deductible. I'm going to have to start that over. So I tried to calculate, right, what's all the money I'm leaving on the table by leaving a job midway through the year.
Hmm.
And so I brought that back to this company. I asked for another 15K and I got 8. I started at 148, but I thought about it and it's if I said yes, please, thank you to that 140, and then they offered 140 to a white guy and he negotiated.
Hmm.
Right now he's
Absolutely.
coming in at 148. Then forever, right? Your annual increase is a percentage of what you're
Yep.
making, right? And so that gap never closes. And the thing is, when I got there and I started talking with the other women engineers, I found out that they were making, gosh, 25,000 less than I was. And so when it came time for annual reviews, they were able to say, "Hey, I know people are making 148." And then they got brought up to that too. So again, it's
Mm.
all about bringing everyone else up as you go as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's why when we first connected last year, I think that's why your energy and your mission in life really resonated with me because it's not
Yeah,
about creating a different form of inequality, right? It's like,
right.
how do you really support everybody in being able to make a decent living
Yeah.
and also earn, I don't want to say earn what they're worth because shouldn't we all shouldn't we all have a
Hmm.
right to have that decent living and have access to healthcare? But I think it was Nicole Hannah Jones, the formerly New York Times writer, that wrote, make sure you're bringing people with you. After you've made that
Mm,
step up, turn around and give a woman or give someone
hmm.
behind you a hand and help
Absolutely.
them make that step up. And I think that that's really important. And you increased your salary by 48% just in one move. And I think I've
Yeah.
been doing a lot of thinking about, okay, how do I support others in redrawing their path when they
Hmm.
really are feeling like that need or they're having a panic attack and throwing up twice before work? Like,
Right.
how do I support that? And I think one of the biggest things, as you mentioned, moving from company to company to company, there is that experience tax, but it's also you're building that skill of
Hmm.
tolerating the uncomfortable and you're building that
Yeah.
skill of navigating different cultures
Yeah.
that oftentimes like when we're comfortable, even if we know we want to make a change, it's harder to think about going into a new lunchroom and having to find new coworkers to
Sure.
it's
Sure.
harder to think through how to hold that discomfort
Yeah.
for yourself. So I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, you were able to do that because you were willing to tolerate a lot of discomfort and a lot of microaggressions and a lot of just really obnoxious cultural things. But that
Right.
ability to take risks was really
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. Well, and I think I also developed how do I want to put this? I developed some confidence in being a Black woman engineer in terms of bringing up the issues that come up. Because to me, I'm like, oh, are you going to fire the only Black woman engineer at your company because she told you about some racism? That's not a good look for you, right? And so to me, coming into those negotiations and things, I felt a lot of leverage
Mm.
because if I'm going to be overrepresented on your website because you want to have a Black face there, then you're going to also need to pay me for my labor, right? For the diversity work I'm doing and all of those things. I did end up at a company that actually gave a stipend to the heads of employee resource groups, right? Which is
Awesome.
actually putting your money where your mouth is if you're saying you're valuing diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is kind of building that muscle of what I have found something better in the past. I can do that again.
Can I ask when, because you said one of the ways you started kind of redrawing that path and what led to getting Black women paid right
Hmm.
now is you started to speak on imposter syndrome and you started to speak
Yeah.
on negotiations and all of the career development things. When you started doing that, were you just thinking, yeah, sure, like I like speaking, I'll do this for free and for fun? And or were you
Yeah.
thinking, oh, this could potentially be a real legit path for me?
Oh, I was definitely doing it for free and for fun. And then eventually I started traveling for speaking, and I would have my company cover the cost of my travel, but it was still free. So it's actually beginning of 2022 when I started an LLC because I said I need to get paid for this. And so originally it was just speaking.
Mm.
And so it was further into that year that I realized the getting Black women paid thing, and I changed it to doing business as getting Black women
Yeah.
paid.
Mm.
So yeah, it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I started actually doing paid speaking and realizing, oh, that could be a career or that could be a source of income. Yeah, so originally it was for fun, and then at some point it was pay me for my
Mm.
work, right? I don't speak for free in Black History Month. I don't speak for free in Women's History Month. If you want to invite people to speak on those things, you need to pay those people.
Mm.
And now, in general, I don't speak for free unless I can also promote my book or do some other promotion for the business or things like that.
I love that. I love that. And it sounds like Just thinking about timeline, when did you buy the website or when did you buy the URL?
I think that was August 2022.
Okay, so it was like around the same time.
Yeah, so it was January to August was let me figure out the speaking thing.
Okay, cool. But you got really clear on what your mission is going to be
Yeah.
in life, and you've been building that path. Have you had doubts along the way or any sort of reframing you've had to do for yourself along the way as you've transitioned from like software engineer to author speaker?
Girl, I literally wrote the book on imposter syndrome. So my book, Overcoming Imposter Syndrome at Work, The Black Woman's Guide to Conquer Perfectionism, Stop Overthinking, and Thrive in Your Career. I published that book in November 2023. And while writing the book, I would literally have to go back and read previous chapters to be like, oh yeah, okay, let me keep going. Like that that self-doubt is always a thing you need to address and challenge. This is I definitely spent years thinking that I am not a business person. I'm not a person who can do sales. I had to make adjustments to my mindset, to my self-perception, to envision what does this look like. I grew up pursuing academia. I grew up with I need to study this, this, and this, and I'm gonna get my A, right? Someone's going to
Mhm.
tell me you need to do X, Y, and Z, and then they're going to tell me, good job, you did it. Being an entrepreneur, I'm making it up. I
Mhm.
got to make it up as I go. And the things I'm studying, I need to implement to see if they work, but it's not, there's no clear guide. It used to be study this thing, get the grade, move on to the next thing, get into the good college, get the whatever it was. It wasn't until my coding boot camp that I learned how to learn for myself and not for the grade,
Mm.
right? So we didn't get grades. It was, I mean, you still had to pass to get to the next section of the program, but it was what are you going to need to know to feel like you can be an effective developer? And I was like, oh, so I'm just learning for me then? That's
Mhm.
what's
Like
that
what?
about?
Why?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So in terms of entrepreneurship, it's more of that. Yeah, I'm making it up as I go and dealing with the self-doubt along the way.
Yeah. So even after you write the book,
Hmm.
it still comes up in terms of, wow, can I do this? Yes.
Hmm.
But it sounds like you've built a lot more tools along
Sure.
the way too.
Sure. And a skill in recognizing those thoughts when they come up, right? It used to be kind of before I wrote the book, I'd be saying something about work or, oh, I don't know if I can do this. And my husband would say, there's this really good talk you should listen to, and I'm like, shut up. And so now it's, oh, there's this really good book you should read. But the point is not to you conquer imposter syndrome and you're done. It's right. You develop the skills, you build up that toolkit, and you recognize those thoughts sooner and interrupt them.
Mhm. Not that they won't come up at all or that you
Right.
can squash them right away.
Right.
Yeah.
The further you go, the more likely you are to be somewhere you've never been before, right? And then it's, do I deserve to be here?
Hmm.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's always going to come up.
I love that. Thank you for diving into that a little bit too.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad you mentioned your book. I have your book and it's a really powerful message too, I think
Hmm.
for anyone, whether you're a Black woman or white woman or however you identify, I think it
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
really, really powerful. And I think the more I've talked to people, I think there are folks that somehow don't let that self-doubt creep in, but I'm not one of them.
Well, do they or do you just not see it? A lot of us look confident, but are still having those feelings. And then there are, of course, the narcissists who are undeservedly confident, right? But you got to think about there are a lot of people who have an unearned sense of confidence who are just like failing up in their careers. And so many of us are, especially women, are trying to make sure we check all the boxes and we got to make sure we're overqualified for the thing before we apply for it. And so it is that how do you gain the confidence of a mediocre white man, right? To
Yep.
to go for the
Mhm.
thing. And I try to think about a job description as if I meet every single one of these things, then I'm overqualified for that job. Instead, it's what do I want to be doing, right? In this job description, is that something I want to be growing into?
Which is a really powerful question to be
Hmm.
asking yourself and realizing that you have some agency too, and you have some control and
Right.
you have the ability to say what you want for yourself and make it happen, not just take whatever job that comes along where you do check all the boxes.
Yeah. And expanding your mind about what's possible. As you were saying at the beginning, if you don't see something, you don't know what's possible. With me, I was looking at teaching salaries, thinking, okay, now that I have, my master's, if I do this for another year, I'm going to get another this many $1,000 or whatever. It had not occurred to me that I could be in a negotiation where I'm asking, oh, 140 sounds nice, but could we do 155? Right? That was just
Mhm.
like not in the realm of possibilities. But some of the women I've worked with have doubled their salary in one go, just expanding the idea of what's possible and what you deserve. I see a lot of empowering language where people say, know your worth. And I cringe at that because it's so based in capitalism, right? That your worth as a human is some number, right?
Mhm.
You're invaluable. There's no number too high, right? There's no amount of money that someone could own you, right? And that's especially a visceral concept to Black folks, right? There's no amount of money where someone could own you. So no number is too high. You're invaluable. And that just takes that mindset to a different level of what you can ask for in terms of you're selling your labor for this amount.
Yeah, I love that message too. And I agree. I think, and I've been trying to reprogram my mind from the capitalism. No,
Hmm.
even yesterday I was writing an email and I said, enjoy your vacation. It's very well deserved. And I'm like, no, everybody deserves rest. You
Right. You didn't earn it.
you
You
don't,
are already worthy of it. Yeah. So
yes.
that's the shift I like to do is when I hear that know your worth, I try to shift it to know you're worthy. Right. So
Hmm.
you're worthy of rest. You're
Hmm.
worthy of vacation time. You're worthy of 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. Right. There's no number that's too high.
Yeah, I love that. Teen, any other advice you would give? Because this advice is like so invaluable already. Any other advice you would give to others who are considering redrawing their paths?
Oh, yes. I mean, so my first path redraw was when I was 18. Actually, incidentally, my first salary negotiation was when I was 18 as well. I think my advice would be to open as many doors as possible, right? That knowing that your next thing isn't the last thing. So it doesn't have to be the perfect choice, right? I've made so many pivots. None of them ended up being the thing that I did for the rest of my life yet, right? We'll see if this one is. But that
Mm-hmm.
because it can be paralyzing to have too many choices and not know what's the right one. So I think my biggest advice is you just need a good enough next thing because that next thing will help open up more paths, right? And so it's just you are increasing your experience and knowledge of what you enjoy and what you don't, right? Every experience is a learning experience, even if it's if your next move was a bad move, okay,
Uh,
you learned a lot. Now what's the next move? And so just not being afraid to take a step and knowing that your next thing doesn't have to be the thing.
and that the next thing won't necessarily be your forever thing and what you have
Yeah,
to picture doing till the
right.
end.
And even if the next thing is great, it still could
Hmm.
open doors to other things, right? So it's not about I need to make a decision for the rest of my life. It's I need to make a decision for next year or next month, and then we'll see from there.
Oh, I love that. I think that's so helpful for people like me who tend to think, well, then I'm going to be a social worker for the rest of my life, or then I'm
Yeah,
going to be doing this work for the rest of my life. And to realize that, oh, you can take a job and decide 6 days in that it is not the right fit.
yeah. That's actually not the shortest job I've had.
What was the shortest job you've had?
I was trying to figure out before teaching elementary, I was trying to figure out if I wanted to work with preschoolers. And I
Mm.
took a job as a teaching assistant at a Montessori school, and I was there for 3 days. And
Oh
I
my
learned a great
gosh.
deal in those 3 days.
Yes. See, you need to teach me because I'm like, oh, I'm not enjoying this. Maybe if I just keep trying harder. And then before you know it, I'm like somewhere for X number. I
Yeah.
mean, let's be real. I'm a geriatric millennial. I haven't been in any job longer. I mean, I think the longest job I've had was my high school department store job at
Mhm.
Yonkers for other Midwesterners. So you already are teaching something in Hey, if
Yeah.
this isn't for you, like rip the Band-Aid off.
Right,
Go.
right. And you can decide how you want to do it. You don't have to burn bridges along the way. In fact, that job, they hadn't gotten a chance to contact all of my references yet before I started. So
Hmm.
actually, by the time they were talking to one of my references, I had already left. And apparently they still talked for like a half hour about how great I am. So there are ways to leave a place well.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's a good lesson too. Okay, Teen, I know we're coming up on time, but I feel like I could keep asking you questions about your story for another hour, but we'll save listeners, or maybe someday we'll do a part two. But where can people find you? And is there anything you would want to share with listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me at teenezekis.com. That's where you'll find the book if you want to book me to speak, all of those things. And I think my most exciting project, I'm launching the Salary You Deserve Accelerator. And so that is for Black women who want to accelerate their careers, whether that is a pivot or a promotion, dramatically increase their income and start to work towards that financial freedom.
Cool, cool. Is that on teamzekas.com also?
Yeah, yeah, you can find that there.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you so much. I'm going to include all of those links in the show
Hmm.
notes for folks. And I just want to express how grateful I am for you to share your story with me and with listeners, and just your mentorship and kind of friendship over the last year since we first
Yeah.
connected. I've just really enjoyed it and appreciated it.
Me too. And I actually just remembered one because it hasn't started yet, but probably by the time this airs, I will also have a podcast, the Getting Black Women Paid podcast. Wherever you're listening to this, you should be able to search for that as well. But Lynn, I agree. I think, we've had just such a wonderful time getting to know each other, and I'm so glad I got to come share my story.
Well, I appreciate you, and I'm excited to share your story.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Redraw Your Path with me, Lynn Debilzen. If you liked the episode, please rate and review. That helps more listeners find me. And don't be shy. Reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn and sign up for my e-newsletter at redrawyourpath.com. I can't wait to share more inspiring stories with you. See you next week.